Okay, everyone. Thanks for joining us today here at the Future of Hearing Healthcare Conference. I am really excited to be moderating a panel discussion with three of my good friends. I have Mr. Andy Bellavia, Gael Hannan, and Shari Eberts. So thank you to the three of you for coming on today. I'm going to kick it over to each of you to allow you to introduce yourself, and then I will set the stage of what we'll be discussing. So we'll start ladies first. We'll start with you, Gael. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your background and who you are?
Well, I are Gail Hannan, and I am a lifelong person with hearing loss, congenital, and all sorts of devices. I have worn them all except for a body aid. And as an adult, as a senior, now we'll just go with adult. I became passionate about hearing loss advocacy because I could see the impact on my life and those around me when I didn't know how to deal with it. I had no role models. There were no standards. There was nothing. And so life changed when I became an advocate. So now I'm an advocate and a writer and a speaker and passionate about improving the lives of people with hearing loss.
Thanks, Gail. Shari.
So I am Shari Eberts and also a hearing health advocate, an author and speaker about hearing loss issues, and the founder of livingwithhearingloss.com, which is an online community for people who are living with hearing loss and tinnitus, and also the executive producer of We Hear You, which is a documentary about the hearing loss lived experience, as well as the co-author with Gail Hannan of Here and Beyond Live Skillfully with Hearing Loss. And really, I've lived with hearing loss for most of my adult life. I started in my mid-20s. I was very stigmatized by it, following sort of in the footsteps of my father, who was also very stigmatized about it. So one of my goals really for my advocacy is to break down that stigma and to help people live more comfortably with their own hearing issues.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us, Shari. Last but not least, Andy.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate being on with everyone. I've been in the hearing industry for about the last dozen years, most of them with Knowles Corp, a manufacturer of microphones and receivers for hearing aids, along with a lot of other products. And about 2 years ago, I decided to split off and form my own company, Aura Futurity, which is a branding and go-to-market consultancy in the hearing and greater communication spaces. I actually came to this place by a different route than Shari or Gail because I was in the industry years before I noticed my hearing loss and got around to having it treated. My background in hearing really started when I was at Knowles, but I think more importantly with the beginning of the TWS era, which also coincided with the run-up to over-the-counter. So you had the early innovators like Nuheara and Doppler Labs. At the same time, the President's Commission, the PCAST was active, and then everything that ran up to the legislation. Really, I learned a lot about the state of hearing care and the unmet needs in hearing care and began to find my voice in that space. And it was then that I really had to deal with and treat my own hearing loss. So I have the perspective of both a professional in the industry and a hearing aid user more recently than either Shari or Gail. And I have to add, I'm also an avid reader of their book, which happens to be on the last bookshelf in the back. It's a wonderful book, and anybody, I can go get it if you want. Anybody who hasn't read the book, who's listening to this panel discussion, I highly recommend you get it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you three so much. I've really enjoyed getting to know you three over the last few years, and I thought that with the World Hearing Day theme this year being changing mindsets, I thought we could have a pretty interesting conversation around the way you see us within the hearing healthcare industry, people that are advocates for hearing loss, like yourselves, Gail and Shari, people working within it or adjacent, like Andy. How can we make an impact to help maybe change mindsets, to help alleviate some of the stigma? And I think that this is a topic of conversation that's had often, of like this kind of conundrum, I guess, of how do we as a society normalize hearing loss as much as we do something like vision loss. I mean, two of you are wearing glasses right now, and I think that's sort of like no one bats an eye at that. People just go about their day. And so I really think we all question this fact of like, why are our ears any different? And so the topic for this panel will really be to explore that theme of how we can all sort of be better, I guess, or more impactful with how we can change some of those mindsets. I'll start with you, Shari, because I know you had some ideas around this. Can you sort of set the stage a little bit in terms of maybe some things that you've seen and, within your world and writing the book, in terms of maybe some of the shortcomings and just some simple things that maybe the hearing healthcare industry in particular could do a little bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that we're discussing this because I think, we sometimes say the stigma's going away or people are wearing things in their ears all the time. And both of these things maybe are true, but I still think there is quite a stigma. And some of that really comes from the people with hearing loss, right? We still feel, for whatever reason, that we are somehow lesser than, or we're somehow not complete, or we need to hide it because people will think we're old or out of touch, or whatever these stigmas are. And I think part of it really comes from the society depiction of people with hearing loss. Still, if you look at advertisements, if you look at television programs, you would never have somebody who is blind bump into something and have that be like the laugh line in a sitcom. But having a person with hearing loss misunderstand something or answer a question incorrectly or say what, in some kind of foolish manner seems to still be fair game, unfortunately. So I think it's, we need to change some of that messaging that we're taking into ourselves, and we need to change those messages that we tell ourselves and start living our lives out loud so we can help to show that these stigmas are false and that there are all different types of people with hearing loss, all different ages, all different sexes, all different everythings, right? That we don't all look or act one way. And I think that is something that can definitely help.
It's exactly. I totally agree with you, as always, Shari. It's interesting though that people with hearing loss say before we get it, we're okay with it. We see that, we see our families and stuff, and yeah, it's normal, part of life until it happens to us, and that's our reaction to it. And it's the stigma, definitely, but it's also that. It's hard. We are prevented from participating the way we want to because we can't hear. We struggle. We don't know how to be a good person with hearing loss. We haven't yet got the courage or the comfort of saying, can you speak up? Or, this is what I need. So there's those elements as well. It is a struggle. But so really, on one hand, it's person by person that we're changing the idea of how we can live well with hearing loss. And Shari and I, we're all about providing tips and tools and helping people understand that life will be better if you can learn a few basic skills. But that's person by person. And how can the industry help us? So much of the advertising that's coming out now, through them, we have an opportunity to hit the broader public as well. And we saw recently with the I think it was GN came out with these new pictures of real people wearing real hearing aids, but they were still very beautiful. Gosh, if I look that beautiful when I put on a hearing aid, really? Is that all it takes, a hearing aid? Woo! But that does help. It's a picture bank that people can use. Also, these ads that they're beautiful people. You can't see their hearing aids at all. But if you wear a hearing aid, you're going to be happy and you're going to find this beautiful person to love you. We have to shift that somehow to make it more real, yet inviting. or at least think, okay, maybe I can do this.
I think it's a great point that it's a very person by person case by case, person by person. And I also think that is why it's a little bit difficult to come at the stigma with simple messages. For example, even the WHO, when they publish their list of hearing aid myths, I mean, they do, the myth is that hearing aids are for old people, and then the reality is all people have hearing aids. And of course, you two know that more than anything, and yet there's a very high correlation of hearing loss with age. And societally, that's what people see. And so unless that is recognized, you're really just telling stories that don't have a lot of credibility. Because most of us, when we go in daily life, we see older people with hearing aids. Wrap that up with other societal issues like ageism in the workplace, and you have a more complex situation than just simply, trying to get people to feel comfortable about their hearing loss. Because many people, for greater reasons, that's a big barrier for them. If we talk about what the industry can do, I love the GN pictures. I think the messaging has to go beyond that to how hearing aids actually help you in the different parts of your lives, how they improve your well-being, how they improve your performance on the job, and why these things are of benefit to you. And combining that not only with a few still photos, but stories about people with hearing loss succeeding in the various aspects of their lives. I would put the two of you on the video, for example. Look at everything you've accomplished in life and in business and as authors and everything else with hearing loss. Those stories need to be told.
Okay, let's get more people telling those stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Well,
I
you
think
asked
that,
about the industry though, right? And I think the industry can move beyond a few still pictures that other media can pick up, and they can drive that kind of storytelling.
I agree with you, but I think they can message it to lots of different constituents, right? They need to message that to the general population. They need to message that to their potential customers, right? The people with hearing loss who may not yet be using technology, but also the broader medical community, because I think that's something that's so interesting about hearing loss is that sometimes it's just not taken seriously. People just think it's sort of this thing that's, a normal part of aging, right? Sort of which, reinforces that stereotype of it happening to people that are older. But, when I go to the doctor, they never asked me about my hearing. I was just doing an intake form at another doctor, and they're like, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? And hearing loss wasn't even on the list. And so I had to go into the consultation and say, well, I have something that was not on your pre-screening, and that is hearing loss. And so not only was it just not even a question, but how would they know how to talk to me if I didn't sort of raise my hand and say, listen, I have hearing loss. I need you to face me or speak louder or not, type on your computer at the same time that you're talking to me. So I feel like the industry can do a job, a better job maybe of sending these messages about the importance of taking care of your hearing to this broader medical community. Because if you go to your doctor and they're not worried about your hearing loss, you're probably not going to be worried about it either. And I think that's a really important pipeline to get people to take it more seriously and start to understand, some of the things that we've talked about in terms of how it can really impact your life for the better, to take care of your hearing and reconnect with people at work and at home and at lectures and the theater and everything. There's this whole world that we can connect to. We just need to do that. We need to care about it and to do it.
In British Columbia, where I live, there is a program going on right now with the university and the research to try and get primary care providers, family physicians, whatever you call them, to how much do they know about hearing loss? Do they refer, and trying to raise awareness so at the primary care level, but that's just one level. There's so many people who don't even have a primary care provider, but it's just the turnover in the medical community and trying to make more people aware. But it's absolutely crucial Because if we trust our doctor and our doctor is not talking about hearing loss, then, it feeds into my personal myth that there's no problem. I hear just fine. And
Yeah, in the US, we have a bit of a problem in that the US Preventative Services Task Force, who evaluates, and makes recommendations on what medical doctors should be doing, looked at screening for hearing loss and determined that primary care physician screening for hearing loss would not change the outcomes. And I mean, there's some rationale for why they did that, because a quick pure tone test does not screen a lot of hearing issues. People don't readily act on it when they're primary care physicians. They had a whole list of why they decided not to recommend that hearing screening be done. But that makes me wonder if anything short of that can actually be done at the primary care level. For example, as you mentioned, just getting primary care physicians to ask about your hearing and use that as one of the check boxes, along with heart disease and breathing problems and sleeping problems and everything else. And I don't know if that can actually be done, in the context of how the medical profession works, but it strikes me that industry providers like the Big Five or the Hearing Industries Association could work with their corresponding organizations in the medical community. Is that even possible? Just to ask the question and have a very short conversation, if nothing else. I don't know if that's possible, but I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's been a topic of conversation for a while, is why is the hearing evaluation not part of the standard physician appointment? And I think, Andy, to your point, that's the justification on their end, is that it wouldn't change outcomes. But I think that, the point that you two, Gail and Shari, made that I think is so important is, by not addressing that, it sort of, implies that it's not a serious thing. And that to me is why I think, however you want to interpret the whole Achieve trial and what the role of, the provider, the hearing healthcare provider with regard to cognition, any of that. I mean, I think the important point to just keep in mind is that we all know that there are that hearing loss is usually a symptom of something that could be worse. And so I think that's where my mind goes, is to say that, wouldn't it be important from a medical standpoint to be flagging these in some instance, just to at least provide the patient with an avenue of what they should be seeking, just like you would with any other ailment or something that you might have. So I just find that to be a really odd disconnect, especially when you also consider the sheer pervasiveness of hearing loss. And it's not something that is it doesn't skew in one direction or another. It just is kind of this shotgun that's all walks of life, suffer from this. And so it's a really odd thing, in my opinion, about our healthcare system, that there isn't any sort of emphasis at all, knowing that there's a lot of people that probably would be flagging for this, and then B, that there are serious comorbidities associated with hearing loss in many of the instances. So I find this all to be very, very odd, and something I think that I hope the industry could somehow rally around and try to make it more of a part of the broader, I guess, medical conversation.
And not appearing to be self-serving in so doing. So what you were saying, hearing loss affects every aspect of my life. Everything I do, except reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I read a book because I have to get away from, but every aspect, every corner of my life, every relationship is impacted. The carrying out, the quality of my hearing loss has an impact, because I have a profound hearing loss. But back to what I started to say about being self-serving, it would be wonderful to see people saying, I love my hearing aids, but if a Widex or an Oticon or a Starkey or a GN is running that ad, it's self-serving. So what other way can we express? We love wearing our hearing aids. It has changed my life. This is what it has done for me. Is it perfect? No, not yet. But it's opened up, it's given me back what I had before. And so how do we get that message across on a larger scale?
That's a good
But I don't
point.
think the self-serving part is a barrier. If you look at the drug ads on television, there are all kinds of drugs that show how your lifestyle will be improved by taking their specific drug, right? People, skipping through a field of flowers because they're taking their antihistamine, for example. Okay. And so I think it's actually would be better if a hearing aid company were advertising that our products will improve your lifestyle. No question about it. It's done in the medical community all the time. And hearing aid companies typically don't market directly to consumers. And in this world, the modern tech world where consumers are getting savvier and savvier at any age group and being able to do their own homework online and research products and whatnot, there's no reason why hearing aid companies should not advertise directly to consumers in whatever publications they see best and be self-serving about it. I mean, our
But
devices
don't you think
will
they do that
improve our
already?
lifestyle.
Don't you
To
think they're doing that
consumers
already?
directly?
Yeah, I see ads of that. Usually it's people my age or a little bit younger and but with no wrinkles, and they're just happy. They're happy because they've got a XYZ, let me say Z here, XYZ brand. So how can, to your point, how can we go further than that to actually have an impact? Because I know, okay, they say I'm going to be happy if I get a hearing aid. Well, I don't want a hearing aid. So what more, how can we go beyond that?
Yeah, there's got to be backup beyond that, right? Not just the fluffy message of, a person skipping through a field if they take their antihistamine, but some, examples in various forms about how people's lifestyles are actually improved. But still, I question it. Where in mainstream media do you see it? You might see it in particular places, but generally speaking, you're not seeing a lot of advertising in mainstream media for hearing aids.
Television,
I'm not seeing it.
television, Andy, on the
Are you seeing
screen.
hearing aid ads on television?
Yes, I am. No, wait a minute. No, you know what? I'm probably seeing retail chains
It
talking
might be
about it.
different. I mean, it might be different in the US, but where I see the ads mostly is in industry publications, right? So I feel like I see ads all the time, but they're not necessarily in a consumer forum or a consumer magazine. Maybe
Exactly.
they're in the HLAA magazine, right? So that's a consumer magazine, but
When you open up People and see a hearing aid advertisement, that's a different story.
right.
Right.
And maybe some of the over-the-counter ones will start to do that, right? Maybe some of like, Sony or what have you. Some of these more consumer-oriented brands or historically consumer product brands will do that because that's how they are used to advertising. And I think that would be positive. But I agree. I think I think they have the dollars to put behind this. And so it would be great to see, maybe more of those stories, right? Personal stories of people who can share how the hearing technology in conjunction with other strategies have really improved their lives or have let them continue in the workplace for longer than they might have otherwise. I think that also practitioners can be great advocates just in their local community, sort of within the medical community, but also within their local community, whether it's, a local theater, a local movie theater, a local university or community college where public events are put on to help educate those people about making things more accessible for people with hearing loss. And if you think about, who might be available during the day to come to some of these lectures or some of these different performances. Again, this is a little bit of a stereotype, but it does tend to be sort of more of a retired, maybe older community that wants to take advantage of these things. And by making the product and the experience more accessible, they would attract, I think, a much wider audience. And not only that, they would just create more enjoyment of whatever it is that they're putting on for the public, whether it's entertainment or what have you. And I think audiologists in particular are very well suited to this because they are experts. Right? We can go in as people with hearing loss and say, we need captions, we need a hearing loop. And they might say, well, just try harder to hear or sit up front or this or that, or, some excuse to not necessarily comply. But when you have an expert who is trained in hearing science and can explain in maybe more logical terms or more scientific terms what the issues are, and that these products do exist that can provide access to people, perhaps they would have a little bit more luck, or team up with people who have the hearing loss, and together we can have a huge impact on our local communities because we have both sides of the equation to share with different venues.
I think that's important because we're talking about public perception here, and goes back to the initial point of this person by person, that this, when it becomes real for you, when it becomes a problem for you, that's when your mindset will change. Hopefully you'll and even then, I mean, Shari and I talk a lot about it, these attitudes that we have that prevent us individually from living more successfully with our hearing loss. So even once we acknowledge it, there's still this mindset that we need to shift, what we call the mind shifts from something negative to something more positive and actionable in our life. But that's person by person. We still want to something bigger. Like Shari and I were talking earlier, I said, I don't watch the show, but did you see that Golden Bachelor? Everyone was excited about, had hearing aids, yay. But then he apparently is now divorcing his wife of 3 months. And I'm thinking, I hope that doesn't have any blowback on the hearing aids. I know it doesn't, but just what?
That just shows you that people with hearing loss are just like everyone else, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh, they fall in love, they fall out of love,
Yeah.
they get divorced. Yeah.
All right, we'll go with that.
For me, I think what's coming to mind is, kind of my own firsthand experience of this is my father-in-law. And he is the stereotypical, in his early 70s, and it's been communicated to him time and time again by his family that, I really wish you would get hearing aids and pursue this and actually take this serious. You now have your son-in-law is like in this industry. He can help you. And it took 3 years for him to really actually finally pursue it. And the reason I'm telling this story is I think that the most powerful advocate you have are the patients, because the patient testimonial that he has is, I wish to God I would have done this earlier. This has actually changed my life. And the crazy thing is that he was embodying the whole stigma of it will make me feel old. And there was, a lot of pride that was sort of wrapped up in there. But the reality is that he is legitimately younger now because of this. And he's living a younger, more, I don't know, engaging lifestyle. And I think again, if you kind of start to put all these things together, the pervasiveness, it's pretty serious. And the other thing is, I keep hearing this time and time again, and I think this is a testament of the technologies getting better. People are really happy when they get them. I think there's obviously going to be instances where people had a poor experience. Maybe they weren't fit properly, and they put the hearing aids in the drawer and they kind of walk away from it. But I think more times than not now you hear about people that have that kind of experience where they say this was life-changing. I don't know, Andy, if you would say it was as profound for you. I know you sing kind of a similar tune, but it seems to me that what you said, Shari, about this sort of working in tandem, the audiologist having such a, incentive, I guess, to want to really elevate these patient testimonials and help them to spread the word? I mean, is it self-serving if you're just elevating all of these other stories and patient testimonials of these people that are, truly having these profound effects on them? So that to me seems like such an opportunity that I would love to figure out, like, how could this be something that could be scaled? Is there some type of mechanism that you could really sort of empower the patients, empower the providers to empower their patients to tell these stories? Because I think, as any provider can say, their number one referral source is patients. It's word of mouth marketing. And so how do you sort of like, how do you amplify that even more?
I wish my dad was still alive. He raised a hard of hearing child, and he was always saying, it's about communication, Gail, to learn how to communicate what you need, speak clearly, because my hearing loss, the better my technology the better I spoke. But my father hearing loss started to get worse. I said, get some hearing aids. And by this point, I was reasonably known in the industry. I was a writer. He was very proud of me. He goes, I don't need them. Come on, Dad, So finally at age 75, my mom had passed and he had a new lady friend. He said, I'm going to get some hearing aids. I said, that's great. And he said, yes, Lois, his lady friend, said, Jim, it would be so nice if when we played cribbage every day, you could understand what I was saying. So my dad goes and gets hearing aids and go down to visit him. And I said, 2:00 in the afternoon, I said, where are your hearing aids? He said, I'm not wearing them. I said, why? And he said, I'll put them in at 5:00 when I go and play cribbage with Lois. But eventually he did have an epiphany that hearing aids don't give you perfect hearing, because all my life he said, have you got your hearing aids in? Which is the worst thing you can say to someone with hearing loss. But he understood better what a hearing aid does and maybe what it doesn't. And we had that talk, and I would just love to have that story of him and I to share. Generational, and the impact on how your life will be better. You'll have a better game of crib with the person you love. These are things that are important to people. How do we do that? Who pays for this type of campaign? We would love to see jointly with the advocates, both individual and organizations, so that and I just want to say self-serving. I'm not saying it's self-serving to talk about this stuff. I just, we all have this cynicism about ads we see on TV. So I just want to go on record as saying that.
No, I think that's the question, is who pays for it, because the hearing aid industry is a relatively small one compared to other things we think of. Drug companies have more money than the hearing aid industry does. Tech companies like Apple have more money than the hearing aid industry does. So the question is how to be effective within the budgets that are possible. I'm not sure that the hearing industry has really thought about messaging to the public enough so that they could create an efficient program. There's very little public messaging going on. And I think that's what I would like to see, understanding that budgets are limited because it is a relatively small industry. But on the other hand, there's a lot of growth runway there because only a small fraction of people are being serviced by hearing aids today, a small fraction of people who need it. So I would love some real strategic thinking about how to reach directly to the consumer with these messages you are talking about, and how people's lives are changed by getting their hearing loss addressed. How can that be efficiently done and exposure to the general public earned?
Well, didn't we learn when we had the whole Essilor Luxottica experience about, what that company did, and I believe it was in combination with Gucci, where if I recall, I'm kind of just trying to remember all this, but I thought that they said that, eyeglasses were in a very similar position. How do you get the general public to adopt these things and actually treat vision loss. And that was a huge ethos of that company, was breaking down that stigma. And they did it by these two Italian companies, I think, more or less went and they made eyeglasses cool. That was their whole MO. And it's kind of like, how do you do something similar, I guess, in this? I mean, because I guess what we're all kind of coming to the consensus is it needs to happen, but who's going to be the one that's like leading the charge, that has the resources, right? So I just found that to be kind of a interesting parallel there, Andy. Was, what really, how eyeglasses became something that it actually went full like 180, where it wasn't just that it became acceptable and normalized, it actually became fashionable. You have designer glasses now that people wear that aren't prescription. They're surely for fashion.
And absolutely, and the folks at then Luxottica, now SLR Luxottica, have every right to be proud of how they turned that message around. They had one advantage though, and that is myopia, nearsightedness, is the most common vision issue. And the onset of myopia occurs at far younger ages. It's actually reverse correlated with aging. So people first get myopia at younger ages, not older ages. And so you have a population that's more amenable towards fashion, as opposed to hearing loss, which has a high correlation with aging. And so not 100% correlation, right? But a high correlation of aging. If you look at prevalence of hearing loss versus age, it goes like this. And so you're first messaging to people when they're feeling vulnerable about where they're at in the aging cycle. And so it's a great analogy, but to try and cookie cutter the glasses experience to the hearing experience is not going to work.
Well,
I wear glass. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Shari.
And glasses, for most people, fix your vision entirely, right? And hearing aids don't have that same experience. So the benefit or the immediate payoff of putting on glasses it's immediate, and it's usually transformational. And the immediate impact of putting on hearing aids can sometimes be like, oh my God, what have I done? This is just very unpleasant. And you have to
and that's the key difference between them, because hearing loss is a problem in the nerve receptors, the oral nerve receptors. That's more, the analogy would be better, would say macular degeneration in vision, which is also a disease of the visual neural receptors. And so you're right, you can't compare one to the other, because just essentially making a lens correction is a totally different animal than trying to ameliorate the effects of damaged nerves. And so it's completely different for exactly the reason you said, because the disease itself is far different.
But the average person doesn't know that information, right? So the average person is probably, because they've had experience with glasses, expecting hearing aids to be the same way, and their family is expecting it, and their friends are expecting it. So that's another, piece of the education that needs to be out there, I think, in terms of the messaging to bring down stigma over time, is that people need to know what to expect from hearing aids and what not to expect from hearing aids. And there needs to be a discussion of hearing aids plus, all the things that Gail and I are trying to get out there in terms of you need these other skills. And I think if people understood it better and had a better experience that they could talk about with other people, you would see that the stigma would start to transform in that person by person, word of mouth way that we're talking about, because we don't know what to expect. So we're disappointed, and we shouldn't be disappointed. We just need to know that we need to put the work in, and it will be transformational.
It's so fine-tuned. My glasses, we're so used to seeing them now as fashion things. I went, oh, I really like these. They're green and my favorite color, hide my bad eye. And I have a sound processor on this side, and I have it's attached by a chain. I think you can see it there. And I started wearing this for two reasons. Number one, I like silver. Number two, it's visible. and it's something different. But I can tell you the number of people I've had come up to me in a grocery store and say, my gosh, that's a lovely looking sound processor chain you have on Zero. But the thing is, if they, oh God, what have I done to my hair? Okay, good enough. So, but the thing is, if someone sees it, they note it. Oh, sound processor, cochlear implant. I wrote an article last week called When a Stranger Sees Your Hearing Aid. And we don't know what a difference we make in a person's life when they see our hearing aid. It could be something simple like, oh, she's wearing a hearing aid. She's still able to go about life. She's not a freaking mess on the floor. We never know that advocacy and the message, it's a little micro mini way, but we need to replicate that by a gazillion times. So to say, oh, I really like that processor. I have to get one too. Maybe I'll get one like that. That shows a complete jump in our attitudes towards our hearing loss, but it's a process. It's a journey, isn't it, Shari? Yeah.
I mean, to sort of bring it full circle, one of the first things we talked about was the picture bank. And I think that's a great example of this, of like, making sure that if a journalist is going to be writing a story in the New York Times, that they're not using an image that's got a completely antiquated device that doesn't, match with reality. And I think that, for me, that I live in this industry, I mean, it's a blatant, sort of oversight, but I think that's such a microcosm of sort of, the reality is that a lot of people just aren't aware of like how to properly think about, how this needs to be messaged. Because, it's like the intentions were good. We're talking about heralding in this new era where people are going to start wanting to treat their hearing loss sooner, and the advent of the over-the-counter hearing aids and all that, and then you have an image that's just this really out of touch looking device that sort of, I think, works as a bit of a detractor. So I mean, obviously there's no malintent by the author or the publication or anything like that. It's just an oversight that they're not aware of. So that's, I think, a really good sign, is that the manufacturers are addressing that by trying. I mean, if you've ever written an article and you've tried to use a stock image that, you're not going to get a copyright infringement, you're really limited. There's like, Andy and I have joked about it before. There's like 3 images that you can use. So either you're going to use the one that all the other articles are using, or somebody's going to go and they're going to try to find one that's unique that doesn't look like anything. So I think that those are small examples that the industry can be doing and making contributions that actually will have a meaningful impact because of all the readership that those publications have. They're obviously going to be seeing something hopefully that's much more in line with reality. And so I guess that's kind of the question, is like, what are some other things that the manufacturers or the professionals or folks that are just hyper aware of all of this can be doing to better, I guess, disseminate that information so that it makes its way properly to the masses?
Well, I think the first good step, but we need more manufacturers to sort of join in for the party, right? And make sure that we have more images, because, even when you go to Unsplash, which is where they are, if you type in hearing aids, these are not the first images that come up. So we need to have a wider variety, and they need to be on other places in addition to Unsplash, right? This was definitely a fabulous first step, but let's hope that all of us and all the manufacturers can really rally behind this first step and create sort of an overwhelming amount of attractive images and realistic images. So it's easier to get one of those than to not get one of those. And I think the other thing that they can do is and all of us can do, frankly, is if we see a story that has an inappropriate image, reach out to the author of the article or the publication. And I've done that in the past, and I know others have. And a lot of times they will change the image if you let them know, because like you said, Dave, they're not doing this on purpose. They don't want to have an inaccurate image attached to their story. So, we need more, and then we need to, if we see something, say something, basically.
Well, and now there's a place to send them to because, right, I would call out people for using lousy imagery, but there was no place to point them to. At least now there is. And it's funny you were talking about the old images still being out there. I suggested to GN that they start buying the rights to the worst of the old images and burying them
No
so they
kidding.
weren't even available anymore.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was really interesting in terms of a public service campaign was about, again, back to glasses, but it was the eclipse glasses and just how every person, at least that I came in contact with, knew that you needed to wear eclipse glasses to be safe. There you go. To be safe to view the eclipse. And everybody got them. And it was protective. And you looked like an idiot, but everybody did it. And I think it was such a simple message. It wasn't like, yeah, you might have to wear them. It was wear them. The message was everywhere and it was easy to execute. So if we can sort of find some way to follow that pattern in some type of public service case about hearing aids or taking care of your hearing health or something, there are examples of it working and getting out to the public. It's just how do we make it as exciting as an eclipse? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
Talking about hearing protection here, and that's been a long, hard slog. And we live in a noisy world. It's getting noisier. But you're right. We just have to find a way to get through and make it as part of life. But if you have hearing loss, you get hearing aids, life will be better. And how we do that is, I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm just great to be part of this team and talk about it, because it's just something that is the reason I get up in the morning, to talk about hearing loss and how we can help other people live the way that I know Shari and I and you, Andy, and Dave, with your, being a parent and wanting your children protecting their hearing. You've got your father-in-law. It's just all around us, and it's just so important.
Absolutely. As much as we want to solve all of the world's problems here on this Zoom call, frankly, I'm not sure we will. But I think that, if nothing else, I just think this is a great conversation starter. It's, good conversation fodder, dinner table talk kind of thing. And I'm really glad that I had the three of you on, because I think you guys all can sort of really attest to this. Gail and Shari in particular writing the book. I mean, I would encourage everybody to get a copy of this. I remember I had an audiologist tell me one time that she said, I think every single audiologist should read this book, because it frankly tells the patient's story in a way that isn't, I think.
If you don't want to know what it looks like, there it is.
Thank you, Andy.
Fantastic. Awesome.
All right, I gotta get
one, two,
all together now,
three.
all together.
1, 2, 3, Shari, 1, 2, 3.
Eclipse glasses again. Well, as always, I very much enjoy talking to you three. Why don't we close here? If you want to share where people can connect with you, continue the conversation with you, as well as any closing thoughts. So we'll go around reverse order this time. We'll start with you, Andy.
Oh, be delighted to connect with people on LinkedIn. You'll find me under Andrew Bellavia. Or you can go to my website, aurafuturity.com.
Shari?
Yeah, and you can find me at livingwithhearingloss.com or hereandbeyond.com.
And Gail.
And you can connect with me on all social media. Just type in Gael Hannan and welcome conversation anytime.
Well, there you have it. Thank you three for coming on today to talk about this very important topic. Will be something that we continue, I'm sure, to discuss over the years, as you guys all sort of continue to carry the flag and move the ball forward in all the ways that you do. So thanks for everybody who joined on this panel, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Cheers.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Bye, everyone.